Thank you, everybody. That can be louder. Come on, you can do it. You've had your cup of tea, and now you're going to enter these fabulous, stately homes and palaces. So come on, yeah? We want to hear a lot of applause. So I'm seated here with two fabulous women. I mean, they have titles, grand titles, but honestly, they are really down to earth. So today they're going to tell us about how they keep these grand palaces going, a few secrets, maybe a few ghosts. Let's see. So let's start straight away. I'll start with very brief introductions. So Radhikaraje Gaekwad, all of you know her, but a little bit about her background. Now, she was born into the princely family of Wankaner in Gujarat, and her father actually renounced his princely titles, wanted them to have a very, ordinary upbringing. He joined the IAS, and she went to LSR, she went to Delhi University. You traveled on buses, and then, just like me, she became a journalist. She worked for the Indian Express, and, well, of course, one day then she met the Maharaja of Gaekwad, and life was going to change. So she married him, and she is now the Maharani of Baroda. So now my second guest here is the fabulous Lady Carnarvon, and I will call her Fiona, if that's okay. Yes. And you have all seen her house, which is the fabulous Highclere Castle, which many of you know as Downton Abbey. And we have some images, so I'm going to show you these stately homes. There we go. That's Lakshmi Vilas Palace, home to Radhikaraje. And the second one, please. That's Highclere Castle. And you know this. We're just missing the dog wagging its tail and running into Downton. Right. So let's start. I just want to ask both of you one thing. Both of you married into these high houses. What did you feel like when you first entered that home and you know you're going to be living there?
Good evening, everyone. So when I got married, it was an arranged marriage, and I do come from a similar background. I come from a principality myself, but growing up in a very egalitarian atmosphere with my father being in the administrative service, I grew up, like she mentioned, in Delhi, in a very, very bureaucratic and intelligentsia life. And when my talks were on between our two families, my parents consciously kept me away from the legacy of Baroda and the grandeur of what it was. This was before Google existed, so there was no question of just looking up stuff on the internet. So I really had no idea about my home. So the first time I actually beheld the estate that you saw today, it was as a bride. So it was through the veil of my ghungat is when I first came face to face with my future home. And of course, it was extremely beautiful. It was overwhelming, as any graha pravesh is for any bahu. So how big or small the house, you feel the same, I'm sure, the nervousness and the butterflies in the stomach. But yes, it has been a beautiful home from that day, and as you can all see, it's a legacy one holds, and there's a lot of responsibility, but it's a beautiful home. I'm grateful for it.
Must have been scary, though, of course. So Fiona, I'm coming to you, Lady Carnarvon. So you went to the University of St. Andrews, all the way up in Scotland. Then you joined an accountancy firm. You had 6 sisters, very grounded. And then you met George Herbert, the future Lord Carnarvon. You were married. And how did you feel when you walked through this fabulous place?
Well, unlike you, I wasn't yet married. so I just met a lovely man, and in a different fashion, we ended up marrying a couple of years later. So when I first saw Highclere, I wasn't married, nor did I expect my father-in-law to die. So I didn't have that responsibility. It was a lovely place to go for walks. and I'd been fortunate to be asked to many such places as a weekend guest, and normally simply left after a lovely weekend. But after my father-in-law died, it became my husband's and my responsibility, and I think I'd probably use the word stewardship as much as inheritance, because we're simply stewards of where we live for our lifetime. And with how we run it, it's about sharing the stories, sharing the ground, sharing the house with visitors and tourists in many different ways, and trying to make the house alive and interesting for people. So it's not just a museum, it is a family home, which is what we both have in common, I think.
So Fiona, you dived into, preserving this legacy. You really took it on, hands-on, and you went straight into the archives. You wanted to write about the people who lived in this house. So you've written 5 books, and 3 of them are about Lady Almena, Lady Catherine, and the one I'm going to talk about, of course, is your latest, and I'll hold it up, if I may. Let's see. Oh, well, we have Highclere. So
Highclere, sorry.
This is the grand staircase of Highclere, and this is the book that you wrote. It's called The Earl and the Pharaoh, and one of the things some of you may not know is the connection Lord Carnarvon, the 5th Lord Carnarvon, had with Egypt, because it was he, along with Howard Carter, they discovered the tomb of Tutankhamun. So apart from Downton Abbey that you've seen on your screens, there is one big aspect of history that is linked to. So I'm going to ask Fiona to tell us about the book.
Well, thank you. I loved writing this book. The 5th Earl of Carnarvon was probably the front page news for many days and weeks in 1922 and 1923, because he, with Howard Carter, had discovered the only royal tomb in Egypt ever discovered intact, more or less. So after he died, very sadly, having been bitten by a mosquito, lots of stories about curses, Howard Carter hoped that he'd be remembered in history for his legacy, for all he contributed. But in fact, he was more or less forgotten. No one had read his archives, his letters, his diaries, nothing. So for me as a historian, it was a book I always wanted to write. No 5th Earl, no Tutankhamun. He was entirely essential to the discovery, and he worked out in Egypt from 1906, falling in love with the modern country that was Egypt in 1906, and with its ancient visible heritage, and it's like no other country on earth, with the temples and the palaces, and it has entranced Greeks, Romans, and all of us today. So if you think about it, you can go back 7,000 years, and I think I have also fallen in love with the legacy of that country whilst living in the house that Lord Carnarvon lived in himself. Our own records at Highclere are 1,200 years. My first written record is 749 AD. So we're living where there's been 2 ownerships of Highclere all that time. And he was very aware of that. There were also Iron Age forts, which he explored, and Bronze Age tumuli. So I can also walk in time from about 6,500 BC. So there's these 2 competing sense of places, if you like, which I adore.
Absolutely. And I mean, you describe it so well in this book. You describe that moment when this tomb is opened. And what you've done, I mean, what all of you, Lord Carnarvon and you have done, is there is a exhibition on Egypt in the basement of Highclere. These images, if you can see them on the screen, are part of that exhibition. And you've done a reconstruction there. So, when this tomb is about to be open, it's this historic, magic moment when there's a little hole, and Howard Carter looks through this hole, and Lord Carnarvon asks him, "What can you see?" And he says, "Wonderful things." He can see this gleam of gold inside. And it's a goosebump moment when I read it in your book. So, wonderful that it's been captured. And, people can know about it. Visit some of these are replicas, of course, but you just get the essence of what happened there in this tomb. So
Actually, I just think that most people want to see Mrs. Patmore's kitchen, so I'm sorry about that. But you now see Egypt. Never mind.
No. So Radhikara, you have so much history. I mean, what can I say? The Gaekwads of Baroda were famous. And actually, I've written about, one of the Maharajas in my book, Victoria and Abdul, because he went, Maharaja Sayaji Rao III, went for Queen Victoria's Golden Jubilee. So he traveled there with all his entourage, his wife, Chimnabai, who was fabulous. Let me bring up, that's you getting married. And that's Sayaji Rao III. So he went with his wife, Chimnabai, and Queen Victoria. I've read those diaries where she writes about him, and she says how polite he was, how good his English was, and how, she always noticed the jewelry, the turban and the jewelry. And then she talks about Chimnabai, his wife, Maharani Chimnabai, who was this awesome woman who, went on tiger hunts. I mean, what an image that is. And he says, she writes in her journals that she was very impressed with the queen, who spoke some English and wore very beautiful jewelry. That was always the key. So, how inspiring is all this? I mean, look at these Maharanis before you. Do you feel you want to tell their stories? I mean, you're a Maharani yourself. How does this, how do you feel?
I think I am a sum of all my predecessors and all the ladies who came before me, who paved the path for me, and they've been incredibly strong women in my family, from my husband's side as well as my own side. And I think I am today where I am, standing on the shoulders of the women that came before me. And there have been some incredible women. And naming one who you bring up, Maharani Chimnabai II, she did away with the Parda system. She influenced policy in an incredible way. And Baroda state is even today considered one of the most progressive states, not only in India but around in the world. The literacy rate for women was extremely high. Widow remarriage was encouraged. Child marriage was banned. Education was compulsory for the girl child. Families were fined if children were not educated. There were mobile libraries. Mm-hmm. The organization that I run, which is over 100 years old, was started by her. Mm-hmm. One of the earliest self-governing women organizations that exists even today. Mm-hmm. So a lot of progressive, vision that came within the family. And I think I'm just learning from that and
Great.
In that direction.
In fact, the press went to town when Maharaja came to England, and they wrote about it. So they said he had this golden howdah, which, the whole howdah for the elephant was made of gold. It needed 24 people to lift it. And at the end of the day, the elephant was given a pint of sherry. Were all these true?
Yes, and some dainties. Yes, and I believe the howdah was so heavy that the elephant would shake when he would lift the howdah.
Oh my God! But you've done your bit for heritage, just like Fiona has. You're the trustee, the main person who looks after the Fatesingh Museum. So let's get that. Tell us a little bit about the collections there.
So. There is a family-run trust, which is the Maharaja Fatesingh Museum. It houses some of the most eminent and largest collection of Raja Ravi Varma's paintings, and of course other works. Many of them are European, Oriental. It's one of those little known jewels in the museum world, and it's tucked away in Baroda. But I invite you all to come and see it.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So now I'm going to move to Fiona again and the great Downton Abbey. So, how did you feel when the film crews came in?
Well, of course, when Downton began, we wondered whether anybody would watch it in the world at all. So it was a funny little costume drama, which all began on the idea of who was going to inherit. So here we are talking about inheritance and legacy. But actually, obviously, I think 300 to 400 million people around the world have now watched it, which seems completely extraordinary. And yes, I think the house has a role and a part, and it holds the cast together, but it's telling stories about a family upstairs and downstairs. And what's rather wonderful is it's a kind of family TV series or film where there's very little action apart from Carson opening or closing a door, if you think about it. Or Maggie Smith used to look up at a chandelier and say, oh, it's blinding or something. But that was a bit about it, which is so nice compared to some of the more aggressive dramas that we seem to get today. But it has, I think, given so many people around the world much pleasure. And it's worked well for Downton Abbey, NBC Universal, because people who love Downton Abbey can come and see the red sofas where Lady McGovern, or that was Lord and Lady Grantham's bedroom, or something very exciting. So everybody can vest in it and enjoy it. And there's quite a big business in the UK with movie locations. So we are lucky to be part of it. Apart from, obviously, Mrs. Patmore's kitchen. Our kitchen's been there for a long time. But people can't see it because that's making food for them to eat. So it doesn't work.
And what was it like having Maggie Smith on set, the late Maggie Smith, much loved by everybody?
Well, wasn't she an icon?
Tell us some stories.
I know, she was such an icon. Obviously, sadly, she has just died, and I think I take from it that bar the last 6 months of her life, she was acting, while she was filming Downton Abbey, she was also making The Lady in the Van, if any of you have seen that, or The Best Exotic Hotel Marigold. So she was always out there. She knew her lines before she came on set. And to start with, I think she was an éminence grise for the less practiced actors who have now become household names. So there's a great camaraderie there. If something went slightly wrong for her, the whole house would go silent and they might be taking an early lunch. Maybe the assistant director wasn't quite on it or something, but so she didn't take any prisoners. But it's been a great honour to have her amongst. There was also Shirley MacLaine. I mean, there were quite a few famous actors who have come through for small parts. Dame Kiri Kanua came and sang at Highclere. Any of you have listened to her extraordinary voice for a whole day. And it was down to 1 minute perhaps on television. But for all of us, we were sitting on the stairs just listening, and it was entirely magical. We didn't know at that point the other side of the story because that was filmed downstairs. So it has been an extraordinary journey, I think.
Yeah. So Maggie Smith had her own little room, which only she could use. Is that right?
She needed somewhere to hang out because it's a very odd business. You know, they spend 13 hours basically hanging around, and before that they've been in hair and makeup, you know, waiting for someone to do something. And out of an 11-hour filming day, they used to get 4.5 minutes for television. So I always thought it was a very odd way to earn a living, but magical to watch it being filmed and then later see on television. So quite an interesting few years.
Sorry, I'm going to go back on this one. I don't know. Sorry. Yeah, because I'm going to go to Radhika. Have you ever let in the cameras into the palace?
Yes, we have. We've had a couple of shootings over the years.
Okay.
But because the home is extremely fragile, and in India, you know, the reverence or understanding or sensitivity towards old historic monuments is not to the level as you have in the West. So we kind of stay away from shoots.
You've kept them away. You've kept the film crews
as
away.
much as we can.
Sure. So you have, Radhika, this is the thing that monarchy was, is no longer there in India. After independence, the princely states all came together as one. And so you no longer have the kingdoms in that sense. You're not reigning over anybody. But there is still that spirit of, I'd say, community, isn't there? What do you feel? How do the people of Baroda relate to the royal family? Have things changed?
No, I think we continue to reap the benefits of what our ancestors did, and the relationship with our people is extremely strong. There's a great regard and love, and it's mutual. That Oh, and I mean, of course, Baroda, yes, but I speak for all royal families in India today. You see them in positions of leadership. You see them in politics. Here itself, in Jaipur, you have the princess, who's a vice chief minister and deputy chief minister. And you know that comes from because people trust the family, because there's generational, bonding and relationship. And I think that same holds true for Baroda. And in all the ventures and endeavors that I have taken, which many of which are unconventional, I have received immense support from the people of Baroda because they just trust that the family is, whatever the family is initiating is for the greater good of the community, not for individual gain.
Yeah. So, Fiona, I mean, it's wonderful to be the Countess of Carnarvon and the Maharani of Baroda, but there's a daily life, isn't there? And this is, can I say, this is your daily life?
Well, I'm not with the lambs every day, but we are also a farm. So I think, like you, the concern with the environment, the concept of stewardship, is far beyond the castle and the building itself. You know, it's so beautiful at Highclere because somebody kindly planted a beautiful cedar of Lebanon tree in 1770. There are some oaks planted from the time of Elizabeth I. So we planted some oaks next door in the time of Elizabeth II. There's a yew tree which is 1,000 years old. The landscape has been there and used for agriculture, for farming, for leisure and pleasure, obviously for centuries, if not millennia. So it's again relating the farming, the agriculture. Agriculture is the basis of all of our culture. If we don't eat well, we don't have life. So for all of us in the world today, that is probably the biggest challenge we all have to face. And in a sense, the concept of stewardship, of inheritance, is we've all inherited this earth. And it's for us to try to steer it or help not trample it as we go forwards. And sometimes the big houses have that generational sense that you refer to, Radhika, and it's what we try to take on. So it's not mine, it's just mine to look after, and part of it is the farm and the agriculture. And the lambs are really cute, and the foals and the little piglets. So, and we also integrate the pigs with the ground. They're so good for the ground. So we've gone back to the long rotations, less nitrogen, trying to farm well, trying to farm with the wildlife, with the wildflowers, with the birds, with the insects, with the rare endangered species. So that is what we have been trying to do for the last 15, 20 years. It's become more fashionable now, but actually it's essential.
And Radhika, you've created a cafe, you've worked with LGBT people, and that is sort of what you are doing for your community. So tell us about it. This is called the Gajra Cafe in Baroda, and it was listed in the Condé Nast Traveller as a really trendy cafe. So check it out.
Yes, so this was a cafe I started last year. It was to give a platform to the LGBTQI community to earn a life of dignity. And food is a great way of connecting with people. And I thought it would be a great, safe, and congenial atmosphere for people, cisgendered people, heterosexual people, to interact with people from the LGBTQI community and get to know them better and see them in an environment where they are working, where they are thriving, and in a space of dignity. And of course, the cuisine is a mix of Maharashtra and Gujarat, because that's what Baroda is. It's an amalgamation of Gujarati people and a Maratha king. And it very much flows through in the culture of Baroda and cuisine. And that's what Gajra Cafe is about. And I'm so grateful that people have given it the love and support. And coming back to your earlier question, that this is the love that we continue to receive from Baroda, that unconventional ideas have been accepted by the people. And today it is one of the most successful cafes in Gujarat, if I may say so.
Wow. Check that out if you visit. So tell me, tell me, Radhika, so do you these are expensive houses to maintain. I mean, this is your place, the place you live in is 4 times the size of Buckingham Palace, is that right?
Well,
How many bedrooms?
Well, bedrooms are very few, interestingly, Shrabani.
Okay.
The palace was built for only 2 people. And so it was the only in Maharaja and Maharani living. So over 175 rooms, but only for a couple. So daunting task. We had to really carve out guest rooms. We now have about 2.
Oh, gosh. Okay, so what's the daily life? Tell me, your daily life.
Well, I wake up to the sounds of, sleep to the sounds of bats, wake up to the sounds of pigeons, usually wake up with a tepid cup of tea, because that's, by the time it reaches us, it's lukewarm. But actually, it's absolutely wonderful. I wake up actually to peacocks calling, we have langurs, we have a lot of bird life, it's extremely green. One doesn't feel you are in the city, and you're transported back in time because of the expanse and greenery. But it comes with a lot of struggles and challenges, which I'm sure.
I can imagine the heating costs and the plumbing and the electricity. But do you open it up to visitors? Do you have ticketing to see a few rooms or something?
Yes, a certain portion of the palace is open for visitors, and I would say it is one of the top visiting sites of Baroda, and Gujarat.
Right. So I'm going to ask both of you these questions before we open it up. If you had to, do you have a favorite object in the museum? If there was a fire, what would you pick up and run with?
My dogs, actually. So I probably should say my husband or son, but anyway. I think it's the people first, and then, goodness knows, I don't know. Do you know, we have 542 fire detectors instead, so my idea is not to have a fire.
Of course.
And we have fire practices with handsome firemen, so that's also very good news. So I take the other way round.
And you, Radhika, say in the museum, let's not talk about fires. In the museum, is there a favorite object that you'd just like to go and visit and look at?
There is a beautiful bronze statue of a dancer.
Okay.
It's called the Tanjore Girl, and it was done by an Italian artist called Felici. But the detailing in it is incredible and beautifully executed. She's frozen in time, so she's in a dance mudra, a pose, and it's extremely beautiful.
How big is it? Give us a size. I don't have an image, so
it's life size, and it's on a pedestal. Yeah.
Wow, amazing. So now, if you live in these stately homes and castles and palaces, there have to be ghosts, right? You've seen a ghost, Fiona?
Well, I have, and I've just been writing in my next book a chapter about them, and I was a little bit worried they might come back and not be happy with what I was writing. And then just when I was finishing the last book, I then did come across a ghost, which wasn't much fun, actually. So,
Oh, gosh.
but I was chatting to someone here, and he said, perhaps if I acknowledge the ghosts, they would be happier. So I'm acknowledging the ghosts now.
Tell us about this ghost. Was it a man, a woman?
This was a man, but I've had the house blessed after Geordie and I took over, and that was beautiful, to welcome people, because the homes are about welcoming people. It's about hospitality. It's saying how lovely it is to see you. It's the heart of what makes us and brings us all together. So I had seen a ghost at that point downstairs, so I also asked the priest to kindly bless him and send him on his way. And the main thing is to find out why they're there, and they got a bit stuck. So he did bless him, and he's less there, I think I would say. But I recommend a house blessing anyway.
And you?
Well, I've heard stories of some sounds of anklets and chum chum happening, but unfortunately, I've not been so lucky. So.
Did it scare you?
Sure.
Are you the only one who saw it? Did the
No,
dogs bark?
this ghost has been seen by a couple of us, and the one up, there's a few who've been seen, 2 or 3. I sound completely barking, don't I? Never mind. But no, the last chap I saw came out, all the lights were on, and I was finishing this book, which has a chapter about curses and ghosts. And the whole of the computers went down, which was very annoying when I was just trying to send to the publisher. And this chap, there was a ghost who came just past the door, which was nearly shut. And I could sense that he was there. And I was working with 2 Labradors. who got up and started barking absolutely madly, and their hackles all went up along their back. And I knew it wasn't my husband bringing me a cup of tea, because he wasn't, nor was it anybody else bringing me something bubbly and nice. It was just me in the castle. And I thought, I'm not going to open the door any further or go out. And after what seemed like a minute or two, he left. It felt like a big presence, and the steps were of a man. And one of the dogs came back and sat in a chair, and the other curled up, and he'd gone. So he only comes between 5 and 6 p.m. along this corridor. So I have avoided working up there after 5 p.m. But you know what? My husband was very sweet, because he said to me, darling, rather than don't be so mad, he said, would you like me to organise for another priest to come along and bless it? So, which I'll think about. But anyway, I then turned the lights off and relinquished my desk quite speedily, and haven't gone up there at that time. I'm sure I'll come to terms with him, but I'm not quite sure who he is. And somehow it helps if you know who they are and why they're there. But not everybody sees them, but quite a few people at Highclere do have similar stories, and nor do we talk to each other to encourage each other to tell the same story.
Gosh, so there, I mean, you have this whole thing of the curse of Tutankhamun that happened when the fifth Lord Carnarvon died, and apparently the dogs howled in Highclere Castle.
No, the Lord Carnarvon died out in Cairo in the 5th of April 1923, and he had his beloved little terrier, Susie. And Susie either slept on his bed back at Highclere, or if he was not there, slept with the housekeeper. So at midnight on that same day, this little dog, Susie, woke up in the housekeeper's room, turned round in a circle, howled, and died. And it turned out the fifth Earl died at 2 a.m. in Luxor. No, in Cairo, forgive me. So that was quite strange. And she's probably buried with him in the middle of an Iron Age fort, because he had the ground there consecrated. So he's buried in a fort which was built about 1500 BC in our estate in those times, which is about contemporary with when Tutankhamun was buried in ancient Egypt. So it's quite extraordinary.
That is. And apparently the lights went off in Cairo.
That's my next book. You're giving it away.
All right. Sorry. You have to wait for the next book. But tell us about the dogs. I mean, this is Geordie and Fiona with their wonderful dogs. Were they the dogs filmed in Downton? Were they your dogs?
They're not. We watch their dog. Mine are very pretty.
They have.
Do you have dogs?
I have 2 dogs. I can't say they're very good looking, but they do have a personality, and my daughters would sell us for the dogs.
Absolutely. Well, that's what kids will do anyway. They'll sell us for anything.
I'm very fond of my dogs, and I miss them hugely. So I'm obviously flying back to England to see my dogs. I have 6 Labradors and 2 Spaniels. So one of my Spaniels has just died, so I'm contemplating in case another spaniel. But my husband doesn't know that. He's usually the last to know.
Right. Well, we have to open up to questions. So if you put up your hands and ask anything you want to know, secrets of the palace, this is your time. We'll have the mics go around. You got the mics? Gentlemen here? Let's see what we have here. There. We'll put this up of both of you while we take questions.
Good evening, ma'am. I wanted to ask, what do you think is the most misunderstood aspect about royalty, and what are some lessons from royal governance that are still prevalent today or relevant today?
Is that question for me?
Yep,
yes,
your
ma'am.
royalty.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I think the misconception is luxury. I think that we are all in the lap of luxury. I think living in a house such as ours is extremely hard work, and if you don't keep updating it, and it's one of the most uncomfortable places to stay in. So that is the truth. In terms of maybe a chapter that would be relevant today, is that what your question was? I think the connection with the community, that there was always the ear to the ground, that you were always rooted. and connected with your people. And I think that that continues. I think people from royal families are still very, very much in touch with the community.
I think the second question. Second question there. Lady in pink.
Good evening, all the three of you. Asking for a friend because she's a huge fan of Downton Abbey. But the question is to both of you. Do you ever wish you had a smaller home and why?
Well, I think Radhika's explained she has only tepid tea, so which was a fantastic line of Maggie Smith's in the best exotic hotel, Marigold, where all about tepid tea. So we all go and make tepid tea at Highclere, but it is as it is. I think it's an enormous privilege to live in somewhere so beautiful and to open the windows and look out over the grass and the parkland and the trees. And that is perhaps the greatest gift. And if friends come to stay with me, that is the gift I love to share with them. The sense of peace, that we have one small television and Wi-Fi doesn't really work. So it's also time out. And it's the preciousness of time and the living every day, which I think matters and which I really enjoy sharing. And some of the other challenges I'm not going to worry about, really. There's a lot of stairs, a lot of walking, but it's probably quite good for us.
I can imagine. So do you feel the pressure? Sorry, I'm jumping in. I'll take a question. So put up your hand high so I can see. I'll come to you, lady in the yellow. Yeah. Do you feel a pressure? Do you feel that you have to keep doing something every day that, keeps sustaining yourself? Or are you a relaxed person and let it happen?
I think, Shrabani, I just enjoy doing the work I do. I love doing community work. So for me, and I love museum. My background is in history. So for me, I think I manifested, my purpose of life by being where I am in terms of service and community work. But yes, there are pressures because a simple thing like in our kind of family, it's very, very dynastic. The fact that I have two daughters, for many people, it is bewildering because it's always been a very, very male-dominated patriarchal society where there is a son to inherit. So that is a question I get very often: that what is the future of a legacy or a dynasty like the Gaekwads when you have daughters? So, but I mean, in my head, it's sorted. Between my husband and I are very clear. We are progressive and we see a future with our daughters. But these are questions which come up.
Sure. So I'll take one from the lady in yellow. Yes.
So I'd like to come back to the ghosts. What do you do with a bad ghost or an unfriendly kind of guy?
Oh, thank you. Well, there was an unfriendly ghost called Grampus in Victorian times, and the fourth Earl he tried to banish him, but didn't have enough bishops. So he called 6 bishops in to banish this particular ghost through a yew tree to the Red Sea. And the yew tree apparently split in half and then they bricked it up. So this particular yew tree, I'm always very keen on making sure it lives and keeps going so that nothing comes back again. And my life isn't all about ghosts, it's about normal life. But every so often, you don't want any more bad luck or troubles than you've got, because looking after any of these houses, you're probably as much into less dressing up as you see on Downton Abbey and more into gutters, electrical boards and things going wrong or bump in the night, but for other reasons. So you just don't want any more problems. But I think people have lived at Highclere for a long time. So they've loved and they've sadly died, and that's how it's gone on.
So, sorry, there's another hand up there. The gentleman in the striped T-shirt? Yeah. Sorry, only one question. We'll come back if we have time. We have about 5 minutes. Yeah. The gentleman behind you? Yeah. Thank you.
So, sorry, I have 2 questions actually. The first question is to both Radhika and Fiona. Is there any particular property for you in East and for you in West that you really enjoyed, not necessarily in terms of luxurious experience, but something which reminded you of your own home, and just want to understand the East and West connection there? And the second question to Radhika is that are you planning to open your home for people to come and stay like the Holkars of Indore have, in Maheshwar, they have started it. Bhosles of Sawantwadi have also started receiving people. So do you plan to do that in Baroda?
Yes, absolutely. I think for the maintenance and upkeep of a home of that size, as of now, we are 3 adults, 1 child, and 2 dogs living in that home. So I think it's the the widest per capita, lowest per capita space consumption as of that I know of. But yes, in the future, we do plan to converting the palace into a hotel. In terms of which property in the West reminds me of home, I think when I looked at the palace in Madrid, I think a lot of it felt similar in terms of grandeur.
That's really interesting. Fiona? Well, you have few estates, don't you, for the
No, no.
cottages?
Oh, well, we
that
have
you're
cottages.
renting? Yeah.
I'm not really ever looking for something which is similar. I love the difference. I love traveling to somewhere different without gutters, preferably somewhere warm and sunny, and preferably somewhere uncomplicated. So I don't think I'm looking for anything similar ever. I'm the opposite.
But also, you have cottages in the estate that you do lend out, so people can stay on the estate.
We
isn't
do
it?
have we have 2 short-term cottages which we do rent out, which are quirky and fun, and then we have cottages within walking distance, which I rent out, tend to be for girlfriends and for people I know, because what's been wonderful for me is creating a local community, of friendship around, because it's not London, and I sort of find people who like good coffee or like barbecues or like good wine. And that's how I interview people if they'd like to come and rent a cottage.
Yeah. One of the things I discovered, a few years ago was that Balmoral Castle, which I'd visited when writing Victoria and Abdul, they decided to let out some of the cottages, and it was like self-catering. You could come in and rent it for a weekend or a week. And one of the cottages they picked was the one that was built. It's called Karim Cottage, and it was built by Victoria for Abdul Karim. And the minute this came on, I got so many messages. My goodness, Abdul Karim's cottages are, you can go stay there now. It's a 3 or 4 bedroom one. You can rent it for a weekend. It's a long way to go to Aberdeen and Balmoral, but it has come up, and it's always booked. So I have people who tell me he's one of the doctors in the royal family, and he sent me pictures. I got there because I had an inn, and he was kind enough to send me. He was an Indian doctor, Bengali in fact, and he sent me the pictures from inside, which I hadn't seen before. So yeah, that was fun. It's always fun when these, I think, estates then have little cottages there that people can stay in. Do you have lots of cottages nearby?
We do. They're scattered around. Some are kennels for dogs. Some are old. They're old gun house. We have a gun house. We have a crockery house. So yes, a lot of, and of course we have some old tombs, which predate the palace from the Mughal times. So we have a lot of old, and a stepwell, a beautiful stepwell. So a lot of old monuments within the estate.
Right. Is there another hand I see somewhere? No? There was. I can't see very well. Point me out, please. Yes, the lady there. Please give her a mic. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for the charming stories. I wanted to ask about the idea of stewardship. Is it all around, do you lie awake at night thinking to future generations? Is it the stewardship of material goods, or is there an aspect to something else that you think about, like non-material?
I feel very strongly about what you just brought up, and thank you for that question. I think stewardship, custodianship these are important terms in lives like ours. I think we've taken, there is an irreverence also to the position we hold, but at the same time, I think we also realize the responsibility that today families like ours are custodian to homes which are fast evaporating biospheres of culture, tradition, age-old passed-on stories. Because especially in India, history and traditions are all communicated verbally. We don't have a tradition. It's an oral tradition. We don't have a history of documentation. Therefore, it's fascinating when Lady Fiona mentions the dates to which the trees have been planted, because unfortunately in India we don't have that. Therefore, it becomes important for us to at least orally remember or put down and document these important stories of our families, and as well as what the material world, whatever has been acquired, and the history behind them. So I think it's both roles are extremely important, but more so that the traditions that have been passed on continuously for so many generations, those should not be lost. I think that's the responsibility I feel as a custodian.
Fiona, would you like to? This
Well,
has to be the last question, I can see. So a short answer, Fiona, but yeah.
I think you're right. It's stewardship, custodianship. It's about the spirit of the place and the sense of place as well as the actual place. And you do pass that on through oral traditions, written traditions. And it's about telling stories. That's what's brought us all here today and to this festival. It's to hear other people's stories, to listen, to share. And it's I think, incredibly important to keep doing that, because those create the values and the sense of culture, and the humanities matter, because we're not just all the scientific world. We are the humanities and the value that we bring to how we interpret and look after each generation.
Thank you for that lovely question. And with that, we have to end this session. We would love to hear about more ghosts and dogs and, palaces, but there we are. So a huge Jaipur round of applause for these wonderful, wonderful ladies. Thank you.